Hello, everyone. Welcome back to Cardiff Fantasy Hammer. Today, we are going to go through Welsh Comp, which we've mentioned in a couple of other videos in passing. We're now about to release the first version publicly, so we'll talk through how it works, where you get your points, and hopefully some improvements to your games.
Yeah, this is something that Owen had suggested a while back. Being a eighth edition fantasy player, there's a good scene there where they look after the game, try and keep it fair, and that it's not supported. And at the moment, I think that a lot of us feel that Old World isn't getting that immediate support. So this is the plaster until the Games Workshop guys put something proper in place, which we know could take a little while. So this will adapt as we go along. But Owen, why do we think that this is needed at the moment, from your point of view?
Generally speaking, there's different viewpoints of how people want to play, and if you want to play the most competitive version of the game, which is exactly as GW has written the rules, then more power to you. But some of us want to use bigger portions of our armies potentially, or slightly tidied up rules. And the idea of comp is to encourage you to bring different lists, change things up a bit game to game. So it's an idea of encouraging you to use not just less good units. It's not just about trying to see less of the best things. It's about seeing the less used models. Let's use our whole collections, not just the same handful of models every game. And hopefully that just adds some variety to the tables in general. You're more likely to have different experiences game to game, rather than traditional old world, which can get quite stale when every time you play against Chaos, you play against the same two dragons. Every time you play against Bretonia, you play against the same Duke and his Peg Bus. And this is just hoping to encourage you to maybe bring some slightly different things.
Yeah, and I agree. I think we've played Old World now for what, up to it's up 2 years old ish now. So you're seeing the same lists in the meta, and they are good, strong lists, but the comp is designed to break you away from that. Just for the definition, and some clarity on the word comp, it means composition. So this is the Welsh composition, and we had some support or feedback provided from a lot of the Welsh players on managing bias, because it was primarily written by three of us and then fed back to them for feedback, and it was quite positive. Do you want to go through how it initially works, and how the main rule of the comp works?
Yeah, so let's go through the basic rules of what the comp is, and we'll have to thank Adam Bassett for his Cardiff Crusade comp for 8th edition. It's definitely inspired a lot of this. So the main principle of Welsh comp, along with lots of other comps, is that you get an additional score for your list building, and that score has no lower limit, so you can take as many negative choices as you want to, but there is an upper limit to the number of points you can gain. Uh, this is because of how it is used later, but the important things are that you can never claim a bonus more than twice. So if there's a benefit to taking uh, peasant men at arms, if you take three of them, you'll only ever get the benefit twice. You can't just spam the same unit to get lots of benefits. But that score gets used in three ways. Primarily, your first game, you will be paired against someone with as close a score to you as possible. So if you finish, as in the example, if you finish at -5, and when you submit your list, you're very likely to be playing against someone else with -5 or as close to the -5 as we can get you. If there's a whole bunch of -5s, they'll get randomly paired, but the idea is that your first game should have a very similar strength of list to you. And then after game one, it goes into regular Swiss pairings like you'd expect. The second way is that the person with the higher comp score gets an additional +1 to the roll for choosing deployment, and so drops first, as well as +1 to go first, which is on top of +1 for deploying first as well. So the idea being that taking more positive choices does have an impact on the game slightly as well, potentially helping you get first turn. And then the main thing is that at the end of the tournament, your comp score gets added or subtracted to your final tournament points. So when you've worked out how many points you've got, if you've got 3 10 10s, but you've got a +5 list, you'll actually finish on 35 points, not 30. With the idea being that positive choices are the lesser used, not quite as good units, so you're encouraged to take them because you'll get some extra tournament points, versus the super powerful, you see them every game stuff, which will be negatives, to try and more balance them out against the soft lists. So you can bring the very strong things and smash all your games, but you have to do well because you will get a negative points comp at the end of the event. Importantly, we are using Renegades for this. The V2 packs will be pinning the version that we've comped for along with this document. And so in the future, if there are updates to Renegades, they'll only be used with the comp once we've revised and accepted whether they've affected the way in which we give you positives and negatives. There's also another idea within this that we've come up with ourselves, which is fantastical forces. So on top of the normal sort of comp points bonuses, we're giving additional point bonuses to what we're looking at as more fluffy lists. So these are often things that give your list a theme, and if you follow the restrictions for one of these themes, you'll get an additional set of tournament point bonuses. Some of these do make your list quite a lot softer. Some of them you can do within your normal lists if you just change some things around. But the idea is that, if you want to do something fluffy, you should be rewarded for it. And some of them are quite cool, as we'll talk through later.
Yeah, they do add a little bit a little bit more flavor, like you mentioned, and it's important to say as well that the terminology that we've revised in this section is echoed throughout the document to try and make it easy. So if you see some terminology that you need to reference, it's usually back to this page to see where it's affected. So a key one there would be positive TP unit cap. That's a phrase that'll get used quite a bit. And Owen will go through a little bit more of how to apply the comp once we get into that section. So the first section in here is actually some errata and FAQ changes. Is that right, Owen?
Yeah, so just some tidying up things that come up quite often, and also to make some things not as overbearing as they can be. So the main house rules are stopping auras and abilities with the same name stacking. So the good example is the Tomb King's Necrotech. They're into Eternal Taskmaster, giving you +1 attack, and people stacking several of them. The idea being that you shouldn't have a front rank of skeletons with 10 attacks each because you've got a really long line of Necrotechs next to them. Same with Mortis engines. If you're in the range of 2, you're only getting +1 movement and initiative. And that goes across the board for spells and abilities in all armies. Those are just the examples.
To caveat that, we are aware that these are being fixed. So the Mortis engines was fixed in Renegades, and I believe the Necrotech was fixed in the FAQ, but they were the examples at the time.
Yeah, we can update this with some other issues, but following those lines, it should be quite straightforward to see what can and can't be stacked. A max unit strength of 40 for all units. This is just to keep some of the giant unit Death Stars in check. Make sure that the board looks playable still. No 200-man units blocking up the entire board and being a whole army. So unit sizes, which is just the width of units, just to prevent potentially like the dreaded line hammer from appearing too often. A comp on regeneration. So going back to something more similar to 8th edition, which is wounds caused by flaming attacks cannot be regenerated, and units wounded by flaming attacks lose regeneration until the attack is finished. For things that happen at the same time that aren't flaming, once the flaming wound has happened, they've lost it until that attack has ended. This is just slightly balance out some of the really powerful banners and items that units can take that make them very, very tough and tanky. And it gives you an incentive to bring flaming items and spells that normally don't see a huge amount of play because flaming in Old World generally doesn't impact very much, other than a handful of units. Now bringing the flaming banner to just in case you play against a really tough vampires army suddenly becomes like a good tech piece.
Yeah, it's one of the ones that the feedback for was really positive, brought back a lot of nostalgia and how people think it should work. So it was an easy one to add in.
Yeah. Press of Battle. This is just an addition for all units gain 2 ranks fighting as long as they are regular infantry, so light and heavy infantry, whether they've charged or are defending. It often feels like in Old World that when 2 infantry blocks stare each other down, there's often not a lot of incentive to charge. The defender often getting more attacks quite hurts sometimes. It's been counteracted slightly in the FAQ by some units getting furious charge, but it's still not ideal. So the idea is that all infantry should be able to fight in 2 ranks all the time, other than monstrous infantry, and you do still get some benefits for charging then, like the initiative and stuff. So there's some incentivizations to actually crash in the center of the board with your infantry rather than just staring each other down. The cannon fire FAQ. This is just to update over the last FAQ some of the questions that have come up around how do cannons hit large target, monstrous creatures, as well as hills and impassable terrain. And it's been changed to not being able to leave the bounds of hills or impassable terrain, similar to with monsters. Once it hits a monster, it stops. But importantly, this is after the target point. After the strike point, sorry, not after the target point. So none of the, if you target a monster, it stops immediately. You still need to hit the place that you're shooting at with the strike point.
I think this one's really important to make sure it's in this comp, but not just a tournament ruling like regeneration might be, because unridden monsters don't really get great saves. I think this really encourages people to not be shy in bringing them, especially with some buffs to giants. But beastmen monsters would go down quite quickly, for example, to cannons if they get focus fired down. So I think it's a really important one to have in. And I do think this is how it's intended. I think they've made an oversight in the official rules, but we can always adjust when we see any updates to it.
Yes, exactly. So we're getting into the rounds of the first pluses and minuses that you'll see. And so some good examples here are the all factions comp. So these are things that everyone can take. So the really common things, Ogre Blade being exceptionally powerful, Lore Familiar is utilized in a huge number of lists, as well as the Meteor Hammer Wizards. People using Spectral Doppelganger and Wounding on 3s is a great combo. Those things are seen so often that you'll get a negative tournament point for using them because they're very, very powerful. We see them all the time. It's to try and incentivize you to use something else. And similarly, you can gain a positive point if you don't bring a wizard in your list because they are powerful. They do add quite a bit to some lists. So sacrificing, that addition to each phase is something you can get rewarded for.
The the next sort of list that we look at do have specific wordings for how you apply the comp. And so it's important to just consider that when you're reviewing your list. There are some examples at the end, but Owen will go over a few of the wordings chosen to help you build your lists as you see them.
Yeah, so shall we go through a couple of our favourite comp lists? The document's quite long, so obviously we'd encourage you to go through it yourselves and look at the factions that you play and see how it would impact your list building. But if we go over just a couple of our favourites now, Ben?
Yeah. If you go first.
All right, so my love of the Empire of Man is never ending. So within the Empire of Man, seeing as they have no good identity in Old World a lot of the time. They've lost a lot of their aura buffs from previous editions. They've sort of gone from being the master of no skill but journeyman at everything to not being great at very much at all in Old World. So we wanted to give them like a small uptick. So Empire actually have a new special rule, which is martial music. Uh, the concept of this is that musicians are not just for leadership and doing a march check, they're to send signals to one another to communicate during battle. And so the idea of this is that by using leadership checks on units with musicians, you can apply buffs to their units as well as detachments from their units. And these are extra movement, but you can't charge just to make you march faster. Ignoring long range penalties for ranged weapons because they're taking aim. Additional ranks of fighting or ranged weapons because you expect a charge. And then steadying, which is supposed to be like a leadership buff, and it gives you cold blooded. And this is just designed to give Empire something to really help them with bringing infantry. Empire lists are often only seen with like war machines and cavalry. And so we want people to be able to bring something a bit more and enjoy themselves while they use them.
And there's still degree of skill involved in that rule, right? So you need to be within ranges. You can only buff your regiments and your detachments with the musician and things like that. So there is still an element of skill. You split up your force too much, you won't see the benefit. But it does give an identity to the Empire, which was always the aura stacking or the buffing faction, and took a great general to pull a big victory from him. So
exactly, and this is only for regimental units as well, which used to be Empire's thing, right? Having regiments and detachments, but now that they're a shared thing, it does feel like they lost a bit of identity. This is just to give them something to work with.
Yeah.
If we look through the positives and negatives quickly, you can see that most of the negatives are around not taking any infantry. You often see, if people do play Empire, fully mounted lists. Cannons are punished. The more cannons that you take, makes sense. Great cannons are great. They're very, very strong. So you start taking punishment as soon as you bring more than one cannon, and the more cannons you bring, the stronger the penalty becomes. Demigriffs and just war machine spam in general get penalized as well. And then there's quite a few buffs, and you'll see that most of these are around bringing either foot characters or infantry. Some buffs for lesser used or seen war machines that are like the mortar and the hellstorm, war wagons, and some of the mercenaries that you don't tend to see. Can all give you benefits. When it comes to the armies of infamy, the city-state of Nuln takes penalties if you bring Hellblasters with Vanguard. And Vanguarding Hellblasters are very powerful and can catch people out, is the idea. And then they get additional bonuses for the infantry, like you'd seen already. They're just the renamed Nuln State Troops, but also for bringing handguns. The idea being that Nuln is the handgun army, and the Army of Infamy doesn't really incentivize that very much. So we're giving additional bonuses to people who bring handgunners in Nuln units. Knightly orders get to ignore the penalty for having no infantry for obvious reasons. And then we're on to some of the fantastical forces. So these are god themed for the Empire. So there's Sigmar's Faithful and Ulrich's Wolves. These have some small restrictions to follow, nothing too stringent. So we've got your general must be a lector. You have to take a unit of flagellants as well as units of state troops. And if you do that, lectors of Sigmar on war give their units hatred like they used to, and a war altar gives hatred and an aura like they used to bring back some of that. You may not take Ulrich units for obvious reasons in that fantastical force. And then the reverse, where you take a High Priest, Free Company, and White Wolf knights, and then you'll gain rerolling ones to wound like old Ulrich priests, just to bring some flavor to if you theme yourself for one of the gods.
Yeah, you'll see that the points for these the fantastical forces do stack with the unit buffs, but you're limited based on the amount of games in your tournament. So a 3-game tournament, you'll get 10, and 5-game, you'll get 15. But to get there is actually really hard. You do need to lean into the comp. Some examples again will be shown later. Some of the wording's important as well. So you've got wording of for 2 for example, on the cannons, -1 for 2 great cannons, or for the first, or after the first. So it's important to give that a quick look over when you're building your comp score to make sure you're applying it correctly. It will get a quick look over once you submit your lists to see if you're on track. But the key point here is to make sure that everyone gets to play with their toys. So everyone loves Demigryph Knights. So we didn't want to punish them straight at the gate, but they are really common. So it's -1 per unit of Demigryph Knights after the first. So you get your first one for free, and then your second one, you'll start to see some comp coming your way. But it's a really good example, the Empire, of a wide range of applications, so special rules, fantastical forces, bringing the flavor to the Arcane Journal factions, and just sort of encouraging you to take your regiments. So it's very fluffy.
You can hopefully see when you go through this that we're just trying to promote a different way of playing the Empire to how people usually do. You can still bring, all mounted Empire the same that you usually do, with maybe even just throwing in a war wagon and some pistoliers to get yourself a couple of comp points. There's lots of like small choices like that you'll be able to make, and we can go over those in some examples later, where you can, maybe tweak and alter your usual lists with the idea of the comp to give yourself a little edge somewhere. We can go through that later. Which army would you like to go through, Ben?
So I'm not a stunty lover, but I do like the Dwarven Main Holds comp, purely because of the balance that the Fantastical Force gives it. It's similar to how the Wood Elves have had a slight change to give them a lift. So the Main Holds, where you get in your comp for your cannons, and then cannons after the second. So cannon spam is being discouraged, but it's not, you can bring it. The stronger runes are seeing comp points, just to encourage you to look for something else. And then the first core rangers unit, again, it's only the first unit of rangers, and then every unit after that, if you want more than one, is fine. Point denial, so this is a wording choice, -1 per 200 points of denial units. So they are units that give no victory points when slain, just to sort of discourage the denial lists. They're going to be useful if you bring them in over the tournament, but this will discourage you from bringing like 1,000 points of it. And then you've got your pluses. We want to sing Kings and Rune Lords, Ungrin Iron Fist, Thorgrim Olixon, 20 Dwarf Warriors, Thunderers and Quarrelers, Slayers, Miners, Gyro Bombers, Flame Cannons. That's for everyone. And then Hewers, because they don't get seen very often, and it's to encourage people to bring their toys. And again, you've got the Arcane Journal faction ones. We've added in for the Expeditionary Force the dig-in special rule change. Can only be done on your turn. We felt that was important because it's not very interactive. It's a very strong rule, and that's how we feel that it should be played. You should have something strong, but you should be able to interact with it if your opponent, instead of your opponent getting stung on their turn, if you've overextended. Follows a similar sort of pattern through the other Arcane Journals, and then the Fantastical Force, in this case, it gives you the special rule of Tunneling Ambush, which gives you a little bit more reach if you bring miners in your list. So there's a couple of these spread out. If they have special rules, they tend to be a bit lighter in tournament points. But in this case, it's very powerful. The dwarfs who are quite slow, so we needed to just make sure that you would bring in quite bad units to get an advantage from it. But it does sort of balance itself out in the long run.
Definitely, it's like you commit some points to it to get a benefit. You do take a restriction, you can't bring gyrocopters in this list because you're digging your way onto the battlefield. But it tries to make up for something that dwarves sometimes struggle with, right? Which is the movement, getting to the other side of the board, the ability to effectively pay for your units to have ambush by bringing miners. Gives you a way to get out there and get to your opponent's deployment zone in a different way than usual.
Yeah, and this is a living document. This will change as the feedback comes in, or we see some obvious holes in it. So people will look for advantages. It's just how their brains work in wargaming. So we'll adapt this through every tournament, tweak it, make sure we get it nice and tight. That leads us, I think, to some examples. Should we go through a few examples, Owen, just to give an idea of how it can be applied?
Yeah, let's do it. But on that note of finding gaming the system, right? Find the thing that's good in this comp and use that. That's one of the core ideas of the comp, is that some things will be more powerful in this comp than they usually are in Old World, and that's a good thing because you're encouraged to bring something different in a different list, and the comp changing over time means that those powerful things to find change as the comp evolves, and so you're almost provided with like another game at list building, right? With for this one, 6 months later the comp is a little bit different. Oh, what can I pull out this time that will give me a little bit of an advantage compared to usual? And that's one of the primary ideas of comp, is not just to stop the most powerful lists from being seen all the time or just bringing up the lower ones. It also allows the game to evolve slightly differently to the traditional one, and often more rapidly, right? We can change this fairly regularly, and we don't have to wait and be beholden for the 6 monthly update.
Yeah, I think that's quite important. It keeps the game fresh. Like you said, people will look for combos or look for units that they can take advantage of, and it does balance the field a little bit as well by discouraging certain things. But you're right. I shouldn't be too negative. It is used as a positive as well.
Yeah, it's a good thing to find the fun and different things every time a comp comes out. The best players are the ones who win a lot of events while the comp is changing. They aren't. It didn't just pivot around to a version of the comp where their army was very strong. If they win consistently with different lists that they adapt to the comp every time, that player is piloting well. You know, um, and they're obviously a strong strategist in terms of list building. So it adds another layer to the game, I think.
I'd agree with you. Yeah, it is a real show of skill if you can master the comp changes as well as winning the games.
So we've got 4 examples here. So our first example is a Kingdom of Bretonia list taken from a recent event. Strong list that did well, and we're going to talk through how the comp would have affected this, bearing in mind that the owner of the list at the event obviously doesn't have a concept of the comp, so they just brought what they thought was strong and would do well at the event. So the Green Knight doesn't get comped. He's quite fair, particularly since the recent FAQ. Between people comping him and now he's sort of been fixed by the last FAQ, he doesn't really need any changes. The Duke, a Duke that you've probably all seen many times. He's got the Ogre Blade, he's got Virtue of Knightly Temper for extra attacks and hatred, he's on a Pegasus, he's got the item that stops him from being multiple wounded or killing blowed. And this is like a really strong character you see all the time in lots and lots of Kingdom of Bretonia lists. So he's punished quite a bit for it. He doesn't take a punishment for being on a Pegasus. The more Pegasus characters you bring, you do start taking some penalties for it, but certainly not for the first one. They're a core part of the army. But he does take -3 TPs, and this is because of a combination of having the Ogre Blade, which is a generic comp across all armies, as well as the combo of his Virtue being very strong in every list, and Syrene's Locket making them substantially tougher, and it's also seen a lot. So he takes quite a big hit on the Duke. The Prophetess has a Meteor Hammer with Illusion and a Lore Familiar. So this is something that you see all the time in many different armies, right? Meteor Hammer with Spectral Doppelganger is incredibly powerful, and people bring a Lore Familiar as well to make sure that it happens, or maybe they take it for Oaken Shield, or lots of different reasons. So this Prophetess is also -2. Their core then of Men at Arms is quite common, but it's not powerful, it's not oppressive. So there's no punishment for that. Obviously not for taking some knights. His unit of Pegasus Knights takes a -1 penalty because it's just a unit of 3. The idea being that a lot of people bring units of 3 Pegasus Knights, and they don't tend to bring big ones. So this takes a penalty whenever you bring minimum units, like MSU units of Peg Knights, which doesn't happen if you bring bigger ones. And then he gets a bonus point for bringing a unit of Grail Knights, because they are expensive, they're cool, they're good, but you don't see them a lot because of their cost. So this list doesn't qualify for Fantastical Force. It's just, they haven't made this with one of those in mind. They just brought it to a tournament. And so it would have had a total comp score of -5. So at the end of their 3 games or 5 games, they would have had a -5 score to their finishing score. When it comes to Pretonia, you don't mind so much about being negative because you aren't going to get +1 to go first anyway, if you're kneeling anyway. So I think that this shows it's a strong list. You do take some penalties for it, but it's not particularly over the top. This list has the tools to score quite big in some games, so it's not too much of a sacrifice to bring those really good units, I don't think.
Yeah, I agree. And again, if you're aware of the comp, you design it slightly differently, or you cater it right. But there's more examples that go into that.
Yeah, the second example. Oh, sorry, carry on.
No, I was going to say I agree with all your points there. It's things that aren't oppressive as sat on them, but I think this is a fair score for 2 of the most powerful characters the list can bring.
Definitely. Now, when we're talking about powerful characters, boy, do I have a list for you, Ben. This is also a list taken from a recent competitive tournament. It is a Grand Cathay list. It's probably as close as you can get to the best Grand Cathay list you can take, and so it's very negative because of this. Cathay are comped quite hard. There are a lot of bonuses you can get for bringing the less used units, but when you take a list like this to a tournament to win, they've brought what you'd call like not a perfect list, but as close to as powerful as you can make it. So they have 3 Shigengen or 4 Shigengen with a combination of items that you see in every event. One has the regeneration sword, one has the Monkey King's wisdom. They're all wizards. They all have extra spells. 2 of them are just a very cheap generals, but one of them is carrying the Moor Shard, an exceptionally powerful item. The core is spamming small units of peasants to hold objectives. So those 4 Shigengen take a large hit on tournament points. You won't go through all of it. But the peasants take hits as well. The idea being that if you bring big units of peasants, there's obviously no punishment for that. They're a cool and thematic unit for Cathay. However, if you're just bringing small skirmishing bow units, that's something that everyone does because it's really, really good at scoring, and they're in every list. So there's a punishment for bringing little MSU units that can score. And then that's followed up by 2 cannons and a sky lantern. The cannons don't actually take too many hits if you don't bring ogre loaders, but the more ogre loaders you bring, they start really adding up. And then the first sky lantern that you take also comes with a TP hit because of how powerful, like the alpha strike of a sky lantern bomb and being able to avoid combat with them is. Obviously, this doesn't qualify for a Fantastical Force, so it ends up actually being very negative at -18 TP. And this is one of those. The list is as powerful as you can make it, and we want to discourage people from bringing only powerful units. You can bring this. It will be much more difficult to win an event, solely because you are likely to win every game, particularly if people are bringing softer, more positive lists to play into the lore or fluff of the game. So it really needs to make it hard for you to win and sort of disincentivize it a little bit. It's a choice that you have to make when you build your list. If you want to win at all costs and bring a list like this, you do really have to win every game in a big way to actually still win the event.
Yeah, you're looking at a 6-point handicap in a 3-game event, which is, this is capable of 20-0 in most armies. But you got to remember that first game you play, you're also going to be against one of the hardest lists in the tournament. You come out on top of that. Then does that snowball you into more wins, or does it knock you back and basically take your win from you straight away? So it is. We are disincentivizing some of this. You can still bring it though. That's the key point. You can bring it, and you're aware of what it's going to cost you. It's just if you're confident, you can crack on.
I think an important thing to point out is that it's actually very difficult to get this negative with most armies, even Cathay to a degree. This is just, hey, I'm only going to bring the best things in the game in the best army. And so they scored this low by chance. We just pulled one of the more winning Cathay lists from a recent event. And this is probably as bad as it's ever going to get in terms of a comp sacrifice.
Yeah, and again, these people don't know they're building for comp, and this is the list that you will see at all the top tables in most events over the last year. So it's very powerful.
So we're moving on to some examples where people have considered the comp. So this first one is a Chaos Warriors list in which the player has wanted to bring some really powerful units, but also wanted to balance it out a bit so they aren't seen as, they aren't negative. They want to bring their comp score up so they're more likely to get the extra +1. They'll have like a nicer first game type of thing. So this player has got a Chaos Lord on a Dragon, one of the more powerful units in the game. Then they've brought a Sorcerer Lord, who is a Demonology Wizard with a Lore Familiar, so they can choose their spells. That Lore Familiar is going to give them a -1 TP, while the Chaos Lord doesn't change their comp score. Some dogs who are just dogs. They're in lots of lists. We're never going to punish you for that. 20 Chaos Warriors. So they've gone to the 20 mark on Warriors, which is expensive, in order to get themselves +1 point. A lot of people bring 15, 16, 17. This player has added a few more Warriors to make sure that they get +1 to try and help balance out some of their other choices. Their Marauder Horsemen have got the tanky combo of Unnatural Fortitude to give them the toughness 4, which is fine. The more you use that Unnatural Fortitude, you do start taking penalties, but this list doesn't suffer from it. They've then taken 2 Chaos Chariots to get themselves an extra tournament point, as well as Chaos Spawn, which I don't think I've ever played against in Old World. And this is a unit that never gets seen, so even though they're quite cheap, as long as you bring 1 unit of 2+ Chaos Spawn, you get an extra TP point. That's 105 points or something, 104 points. So that you can get just a cheap, easy score for something that isn't used very much. And then they've also brought a Warpfire Dragon. So while they don't get Fantastical Force benefits, the Warpfire Dragon gives them a -2 to try and stop people from spamming too many Chaos Dragons. The Warpfire's penalty increases if you have other Chaos Dragons. So they actually finish it as 0, while they've got -3 points overall for the Lore Familiar and the 2 dragons. They balanced it out by taking some Chaos Spawn and some Chariots that you don't usually see, and upping that Chaos Warriors unit to be like a real points investment in their core into a big unit that's cool and very thematic. They've been able to balance out their negative choices, so they've got just a flat list. If they play against harsh armies, they're going to get the +1 to go first. And they've still got some really strong choices in this list. So it feels very balanced, and it means that they're not going up first round against someone who's brought a beat down Cathay list, but they're still going to punch their own weight, right? They've got a couple of really strong units and then some things to sort of bring them up a little bit in terms of fun.
Yeah, and it's the sort of list where you get to bring your toys, you get your Chaos Lord on the Dragon. With that new model coming out, I'm sure we'll see plenty of Chaos Dragons being ridden around. It is powerful, like you said, the dragons are powerful. But if you come across this in a tournament, you've got Spawn against you, you've got some Chariots. It's a good balanced list at the same time as having some strong elements, which is exactly what you would expect in a Warhammer list without it feeling too oppressive. So it's clever list building, strong. With if they get third place and that Cathay player is in first, they could creep into second or even first place if there's negative comp involved. So it's something to keep in mind.
Definitely, and when I look at this list, I think, there's 2 dragons, and you often play against 1 or 2 dragons when you play warriors, but I would enjoy playing this. The last time I saw it, I don't know if I've ever seen a spawn on the field. Don't really see chariots, a big unit of warriors to fight me. It feels like it'd be a very different experience to how I normally play against warriors, and that's what we want to see, right? They've been encouraged to bring something different in order to maintain their comp score. Okay, so the final list is an example of someone who's leaning into the comp, trying to get some extra points and qualify for a fantastical force. So this is a Wood Elf list. It's brought a Branch Wraith. They're quite fun little characters. They're not particularly strong, but they are cool, particularly within the woods theme, the tree people theme. So we give the first one of those you bring, you get a tournament point. A very strong wizard, a level 4 who has the Glamour Weave Kindred, which sort of turns them into, like a faux tree spirit. We've got a Tree Man Ancient. Not a particularly competitive choice, but they are awesome. They're really, really cool. I love the model. I want to see more of them. Core of Dryads. So the first 2 units both qualify for the comp benefit for being 15 plus, which is quite, a points investment. The third one also would qualify for that, but because they've claimed it twice, they can only ever get it twice. They got 2 units of Treekin who are now, really strong with the improvement to toughness 6. And then a Tree Man who's been given ambushes, as well as a Treekin who gives you another point as well for quite an expensive unit that doesn't necessarily do a huge amount. So this list isn't a super strong Wood Elf list, but it is really cool. They've brought an entirely Treekin army, not Treekin, but like a Tree Spirit army with Dryads, Tree Men, Treekin, and even a Wizard who's starting to turn into a tree. And so as part of that rewarding, it leads into the fantastical force. So this gives you an additional TP and it gives you extra benefits. So you can spend points to turn a Tree Man and a Branch Wraith into named characters from previous editions. So those are Durthu and Drika. But it also gives you a special rule, Rouse to Wrath, which adds a special type of ambushing for tree spirit units. So the Tree Man Ancient is going to be stronger than usual because he qualifies to become Durthu, and the Branch Wraith will be stronger than usual because they qualify to become Drika. They provide their units with some benefits, or in the case of Durthu, he becomes more of a combat wizard than just a wizard with 3 attacks. And so when you combine all of that, as well as the additional TP, this player actually gets +6 overall, which means that at the end of the event, they get a little boost of 6 points. But it also means they're much more likely to be able to choose sides or potentially go first in more of their games than they would have otherwise, as well as having, a fun first game against a potentially softer list with also a nice tournament point benefit.
Yeah, and this whole army, I think, if you get a good roll on that special rule, could potentially ambush as well. So there's a lot of tricks that can come out of it. It's interesting. It's not impossible to play against. Nothing's too mean. Things that you spend points on will obviously be relevant, I guess. So, but it is something to consider, right? This person's done it. They've lent into it. I'm sure they'll have fun. It's the sort of list I would love to run. Even just to try it out once and a fun event. But yeah,
I
good
think
a good example.
this is a list that people want to play against as well, right? It looks like fun. It's all tree spirit. It'll look really good on the table. You don't get the opportunity to play against this often, if ever. So your opponents will also have a really good time. You get some benefits for taking it. And it's the kind of thing we want to try and encourage Welsh Comp running events. Bring something different that you'll have fun playing, some toys you don't usually get to play with, and your opponents will hopefully have more fun and see something new as well.
Yeah, and if you're a Wood Elf collector, you might already have this entire army ready to go, right? So it's just about putting it down and having a go with it instead of collecting more dust because dragons and war dancers and whatnot exist.
Yeah, and that's what a lot of what Welsh Comp is. It's not just if you're a new player, it allows you to buy the cool fun models rather than just being restricted to, oh, if I buy the battalion, I can only use 2 of the 3 units in it because one of them has got very bad rules. This hopefully document will give you a reason to use that chariot or that that Cygor or something that came in your battalion box. Or if you're an old player, you haven't been able to use some of your toys for a long time, hopefully this gives you a reason to dust some of them off.
Yeah, that's what we want. We want people to have fun, no matter how they choose to have it, and then give everyone a chance at winning, based not just on the merit of the strength of their list. The pilot needs to put some work in for some of it. It'll be exciting to see it being put into play. I know that we're going to put in our events going forward. It will get adjusted. The last page of the document is a little design commentary to sort of go over what we've already been through and how we plan to continue to develop it based on feedback. It might get lighter in some areas as the rules get streamlined or improved, or if things become a little bit more complex, we'll iron out the problems in this document to sort of bring some balance back.
Yeah, so there's something for you to read through there if you're interested in some of the decision making within the list themselves as well, right? What the players were thinking when they chose those units, to get an idea of how you can use some of the rules yourself as well.
Yeah, for sure. Any other closing comments, Owen?
I think only that this document is intended to bring the top down a little bit and the bottom up a little bit, so that the average game feels closer. We want people who come to Welsh Comp events to know that they've got a chance in every game. And the games where it feels like your opponent has a much stronger list than you, you've got some benefits to it, right? You know that you've got a better chance of going first. You've got a better chance of choosing sides for deployment. And at the end of the day, they're going to take a hit at the end of the event, and you'll get a step up. So like the concept is just that we want you to feel like you've got a good chance, even if you do choose to bring some of the more fun options and the lesser seen options.
Yeah, absolutely. There is an event in Cardiff in October the 3rd for a one-dayer. This will be in place. We might review some of the lists, see how the comps affected some list building decisions, see if many people have lent into it or not, and maybe go over it closer to the time. But if you do want to see more of this Welsh comp breakdown, drop a comment, let us know. If there's enough interest, we might go through the factions or the books a bit more in depth to give a better overview. Do all the usual things, like and subscribe, stay tuned for more tournament information or Welsh comp information. I've got nothing else. When
No, that's great. Thank you for joining us. We'll drop the Welsh Comp link in the description. Have a read and please give us some feedback as well in the comments. Let us know what you think.
Yep.
Thanks everyone
Thanks
for
all.
joining us.
Cheers.